host Nelson with Cascade Media Group, and tonight we're on our educational channel, and we're lucky to have one of the uh, young superintendents in the nation, Miss Dr. Stubblefield. How are you doing? She's over here at KCK. How are you
Yeah,
doing?
I'm well. So glad to be here with you today.
I'm so glad to have you for real. Uh, as I said off camera on all our interviews, what I try to do is say, let's go back to kindergarten and tell our
Okay.
audience a little bit about yourself and uh, some of the significant uh, things in your life and some of the mentors that help you become who you are and help you get where you're at. Floor is yours, Doc.
Okay. I was born and raised in Kansas City, Missouri. Grew up on the Missouri side, attended school in Kansas City, Kansas City, Missouri public schools before they were KCPS, they were KCMO public schools. So I my mom was a single mom, and I am the seventh of 8 of her children, but I have 3 other siblings that weren't part of our mom. So I come from a large family. I will say I was my experience in education is why I'm where I am today. Every teacher that I had, my from first through 6th grade was a Black teacher. And my kindergarten teacher was not, but I will say every teacher that I had, K through 6, um, always looked at me and saw what I could potentially be. And they poured into me, and always told me how bright I was, how smart I was. And despite the fact, and my mom has passed away, my biological mom, but because she had 8 children, she was not involved in school in the traditional manner. But what I would say I was fortunate to, my experience was my teachers didn't hold that against me. And I think sometimes that happens for students, that sometimes educators respond to students based off how their parents show up. But my experience was not that. And so I turned out to be an educator because I had such a positive experience throughout my early education career. I graduated from I graduated from Northeast High School in Kansas City, Missouri, and there I was a scholar athlete. I'm doing air quotes because I did not continue with athletics after high school, but athletics played a huge role in my life. And one of the big mentors in my life who went on to actually become my adopted mom was my high school coach. And I'm still immersed in her family, which is what my connection to Kansas City, Kansas, because she grew up on the Kansas side. And so that's how I grew to have my Kansas family. I graduated from the University of Kansas. I'm trying to fast forward through that, with a degree in education. And my first teaching experience was in the Center School District, which is, just in South Kansas City. And then from Center, I went to the Blue Valley School District, where I got my first administrative job as an assistant principal. And I was there for 6 years. And then prior to coming to Kansas City, Kansas, I was in Lawrence Public Schools for 13 years in a variety of roles, from principal to interim superintendent 1 year. But my last role there was deputy superintendent. And I've been here in Kansas City, Kansas the last 2 years. I always have to say this, I'm a mom. I have 3 sons. My youngest just graduated from high school and will be actually off to college next week. And my husband is also an educator. He's the associate superintendent in Shawnee Mission Public Schools. Met my husband in my first teaching job. So we have grown together as educators. Yeah.
Boy, so many of our superintendents that I've interviewed, y'all have everybody has the same, the ones that of color have traveled the same path. And boy, you'd be surprised how large the families everybody comes from.
Yeah.
Now what I'd like you to talk about is some of the challenges that you've had in your current situation? And by the way, can you give our audience what's your mixture of your student population for
Yeah.
the most part?
So in Kansas City, Kansas public schools, we have around 21,000 students. 56% of our students identify as Hispanic, about 24% are African American, and then the other components make we probably have, I think, about 10% white. I could be off. I should know that off the top of my head. But then we have over 70 languages that are spoken here. And about 90% of our students or more are on free and reduced lunch. So there and Kansas City, Kansas public schools is filled with rich tradition. At all of our high schools, our alumni are very supportive and very proud of the high schools that they have graduated from, and support all of our students throughout. This community really wants to change the trajectory of our students so that the community can grow and thrive and move forward. We have lots of opportunities. I know you said challenges, but I like to frame them as opportunities around really being creating a space for students to discover their strengths and discover who they are and what they want to be, so that they can change the trajectories of their lives. If it's and aspire to things that that will bring this community and move this community forward. So some of the challenges that we face or opportunities that we face is really pouring into our students around violence is not the answer to resolving conflict. Also making sure that our students have access to technology and educational experiences that will prepare them for the world, the large world that exists outside of Kansas City, Kansas.
You said and that you said went over this real quick with the fast 90% on these lunches and food.
Free and reduced, yeah.
Yeah, all right. What was that correct? You said 90%?
Yeah, I may so it might be 86 or 9,
Right.
but
Well, hold it. The bottom line
us.
is what I want to point out
Yeah.
to our community that if it's an 80 or 75%,
Yeah.
there's a significant amount of our kids that are going to school and need these type programs.
Yes.
And I wanted you to talk about that just a little bit if you could.
Yeah, so how students qualify for free or reduced lunch is based off of their family income. So we know when our students show up, we are not making assumptions about what their experiences or home lives are, but we know that it's important for us to provide whatever that they need so that those are not barriers to them having a great learning experience. So we provide all of our students with school supplies. We we don't expect and parents can purchase what they choose, but so that is not stigmatized in any way. At the start of the school year, all of our schools provide our students with school supplies. We also make sure that, next year will be a district where it's everyone will have access to breakfast and lunch for free, even if you happen to be on reduced or paid lunch. We will be a community free lunch school district. We make sure we don't charge fees for a lot of actually for anything that is required for students in general for them to access their education. And then we provide lots of supports from tutoring to after school programming. And we also partner with a lot of community partners to ensure that those things are available for our students. So we come from the space of if it's something that we're saying the students should have access to, that we'll make sure that we provide it for them.
what kind of budget do you deal with, and how do you feel that you have enough financial support from the state?
So that's a tricky question. We have a $500 million budget, and that majority of any budget you look at in schools is for salaries and things, but we have a $500 million budget. The current way that in Kansas, how schools are funded, it's called the Gannon ruling. So they take into factor the amount of students that are at risk, and they give you additional funding for that. So that current formula on how we're funded is equitable. The key is to make sure that that formula is being funded. And for the most part, it is. So if that formula stays intact, it's due to expire in 2027. And the adjustments are made around, like just the cost of living, which is like the CPI or inflation, that is on the right pathway to fund schools in an equitable manner. I lost my train of thought, but
that's all right. Let's go to I'm the cutoff king anyway.
Okay, so the current formula, as long as it's fully funded and takes those things into account, it's an equitable formula. Where we're underfunded is special education. We don't fully fund that. Yes.
This is as I said, I'm the cutoff king.
Cut me off.
I want to know about your teacher makeup per se. Males, if you can give me not something exact, but how many male teachers, teachers of color, and as you noted, there are more Hispanic individuals and students coming into the public school system now, bilingual and so forth. Can give our audience a little snapshot of what's going on in your district to a degree.
And I really was trying to pull it up so I give you
accurate. Yeah, but I'm saying off the top of your head, this is not like I got you.
Have, so most of our teachers are would identify as white females. Most on the certified side, when you look at our those are people who went to college, have a degree, and they're in like the educational realm, like administrators and things. Most of our hourly employees are on the classified side, are people of color, predominantly and currently predominantly Black. So we do have, we recently recognizing and embracing the gift of being multilingual. We changed our ESL and migrant department name to the Multilingual Education Department because we really want to highlight that as a strength versus looking at it not as a deficit, but sometimes it's labeled like, oh, it's it. In some ways, people may take that as like, oh, you have to now do something different. Where we
take it as progress.
Yes. So we changed our name to multilingual because we have over 70 languages spoken. And I heard this at a conference, and I've started to reference our students who speak multiple language as linguistically gifted, because they truly are. I am not bilingual. And I think anybody who is bilingual or speaks more than one language they are linguistically gifted to master those kind of things. So our staff demographics do not match our student demographics, and that is something that we are intentional about, really trying to recruit staff that looks like our students, but also knowing that the pipeline for that doesn't match up when you look at the number of the people who are actually going into education. So being also intentional about people who know and embrace diversity and is willing to learn and honor the different cultures that we have that make up our student demographic.
All right. So now, last but least, I want to talk about the educational panel that Cascade Media Group commissioned to look into or ask some questions about education of people of color, and I gave you some of the things, and I just want to know what you're feeling. It was 5 different key points that had some subcategories, but fundamentally, they are the things that these educators feel are hindering people of color. The first one was lack of literacy skills, in parentheses, more than just reading, writing, vocabulary, also reasoning and analytics. What do you have to say? Would you agree or disagree that that is one of the major holdbacks or things that are contributing or not contributing for people of color getting a good education?
So, I don't agree or disagree. I think it's really we're educating different humans for what our students have access to. I spent half a day yesterday, like really looking at and understanding AI. So how our schools have been, how teachers are being educated on how to teach students does not match the reality of what our teachers in some facets. So if you think about, like, if I've been in education over 23 years, I'm actually 25 years, and how I was educated, and although I continue to get professional development, I have not, and there's not a course on how to infuse AI into what our kids and still look at our standards and those kind of things. Our kids can go on Snapchat. Like if I say, hey, I need you to write a paper about XYZ, they can go to Snapchat, go to some AI thing and produce a paper that is beautifully written. And so we need to know how to say, I know you're going to go use AI. So how do you infuse your personal story instead of like that meshing up against it? You cheater, you have a 0, because then we turn students off on education because it's a negative experience. So I think what those the lack of literacy skills, like not just reading, writing, vocabulary, about reasoning, analytical thinking, and those I think computation and communication skills, this generation of students, their experiences are different. So we have to adapt to figure out how to get them to do those things in the way that they learn. So it's some adjusting on the students' part and our part, because they can Google anything. Like they can,
You
anything, and they communicate differently because their form of communication, good, bad, or indifferent, is social media. It's the texting, is those things. And that's the norm for them. I have an 18-year-old, and the stuff that I had his phone the other day because it was broken. So they have group chats for everything. I mean, they're planning everything from parties to celebrations to study groups. And we have no idea that that's what they're doing, but they're not like, and then they can stand up and deliver when you put them on a spot, like in some ways. Now, what they delivering it or how they're delivering it may be a little different than what we formally have been educated to do. But I've just been able to witness brilliance, not only in my own son, but saw a panel of students yesterday, and they really it was a room full of superintendents, and they were really telling us how we're missing the mark. So this just made me reflect on how we're delivering education, and they basically told us in some ways we waste a lot of time on some of the traditional things.
All right, let me say this. I'm going to give validation to what you're saying. If you go to our network in education, so I have interns, and so I had some of my UMKC interns and go to the student union, and ask fellow students, where do you get your information? And you can see all of that on camera. And they were saying Snapchat, Instagram, blah, blah, blah. I'm the type that came up every night, basically. I'm watching the 5 o'clock news, then I'm watching the world news at 5:30, and then I'm going to PBS. And I was like, where are these kids getting this daggone information? They lost. But what you said, no, they weren't lost. I'm lost. I'm not in tune with the what's going on. I'm looking at Snapchat as one thing when Snapchat and Instagram and what have you are being used in very intelligent ways, and a whole lot of information is going across. But because of my bias on how the prism I'm looking at the world through, and I think you had a great observation, the intelligence and the AI and all of that has far superseded our methods in teaching and bridging that gap. All right, let's move forward with the second lack of knowledge and lack of black history per se. How do you feel about that?
So I think that is twofold. One, when you look at, depending on where our students are being educated and what's in the textbook, and when you just look at the rhetoric around what's happening with the misunderstanding between culturally relevant teaching and critical race theory, and how books and things were being banned in certain parts of the country. So, and when a lot of stuff was never in the textbooks, right? And so when you have teachers teaching that, so I think when educators are looking at that, instead of relying on textbooks around that, how do we help students when we are giving them research projects and those kind of things to really do a self-study about who you are. So if I am Black and I have to research, where my family came from, what the era was like for my great grandpa and those kind of things, I inadvertently not only learn about my family, or, in some cases, because of the way so many Black people, because of slavery, is maybe not a lot of history there, but really looking at helping students discover who they are. And in that manner, they will be able to also discover Black history and history in itself. But, and in those spaces where you do have textbooks and it's not about self-discovery, always look for the counter story, right? So if you are teaching about World War I, and it's predominantly telling the narrative that's in the textbook, like really saying, okay, there were other cultures around, and helping students to peel back like what was happening with people who look like you during that time if they're not represented in the textbook. But that kind of nuance to teach in that manner, it takes there are some people who are gifted in that way, but again, like how teachers are educated, it doesn't necessarily look like that. But then you have to have leaders in place that give people permission to do it, and then also expect people to do it and give them the resources to actually educate students in that manner. But in the reality of what's happening in this country right now, there's a lot of pushback against that. And we have to be clear and stand up and say, this is not an indoctrination of anything. It's really the true history of America. And if we teach the true history of America, our Black students will see the contributions that their ancestors made, as well as like, all of our students will see the full story.
All right, let's go to number 3, lack of vision.
So that one I would push back on, because most of them have a vision. It's just a vision that doesn't align with what we traditionally have known. So I would say we just had graduation, and majority of our students do have a vision, and it may be, traditional, like I'm going to college, I'm going to the military, I have this. But there are some students who creatively, what they're saying doesn't align with what the mainstream is. And so how do we get them to cultivate and articulate what it is that they are desiring in the moment? Some of them just haven't evolved and mature, and they don't know. And then some of them are dreaming about things or have a vision about things that we don't necessarily have the capacity to understand. So I think it really is about helping students to know, like, whatever you are desire to become or want to be, you got to have a plan. But I push back on that. Majority of them don't have a vision. Majority of them have a vision. They just haven't really, they don't know how, or their how is not the traditional method. So we just have to navigate and really help them. It actually goes back to the first one, help them to figure out how they're going to, become self-sufficient and get to where they're
All right. Let's go number 4. Lack of self-discipline, willpower, giving up too easily. Do you feel that that has anything to do with
So that I would say that doesn't reflect majority of our students. Now we're talking about the portion that does. I think that a lot of times there are things that have happened in people's lives and they haven't really had the support or structure to deal with it. So then it shows up in this lack of self-discipline and willpower and those kind of things, because the structures are not in place to help them to restore or repair or move forward, given some of the trauma and challenges that they have. But what I will say with all of these, I do agree that there are barriers, but how we remove those barriers really needs to be the focus of educators.
well, that's the whole focus of what we're doing right now.
Yeah.
First, to get agreement with educators that are been in the system, educators that are in the system, and then in 6 months say these are what we see, and it can be refuted, but not with much credibility if the superintendents and the teachers are saying this is the problem, and then see what we can put together that can help solve the problem, that attacks and with laser focus on 2 or 3 of the issues. Can't solve the whole world's problems or the educational system problems, but we can agree to take our first step to try to solve some of the problems. Number 5, low expectations and self-esteem. Thoughts of failure appear more than thoughts of success. How do you feel about that?
So are you saying that the educators have low
No,
expectations of the
the
students?
kids. These are things that we find are hindering the kids. All I can go by is my experience in life. And I come out of New York City school system where they had 3 different types of diplomas: a general diploma, a commercial diploma, and an academic diploma. I got a general diploma. It was like shop, 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 and gym, gym, gym. And Luther Vandross was my classmate. Luther used to be running around in the hallway you never know how the education system and who's in the education system that is a role model that will take you to that next level. And I I had low expectations. The person in my life was my coach. I ran track, and that's like a father figure. Our network deals what's happening with people of color for the most part, and we try to speak truth to
No,
power.
absolutely. Yeah. So I will say that if since I'm clear on we're talking about students, if they have low expectation and low self-esteem, they got that from something happened, or somebody projected that onto them, or somebody didn't speak life into them or encourage. So my experience, and I think you said it was similar to a lot of the other superintendents, somebody looked at us and said, you are great in some manner, that helped my expectations of myself and my self-esteem, right? Like my experience around that. And I have siblings that was not their experience. So we were in the same household and had two very different experiences in the same schools.
Well,
And so whatever is happening, so how do we unpack, since this has happened to our students and this is where they are? I think our focus really needs to be about changing that experience for our students, one, on the front end, and on the back end where they're already there. What are we doing to help them to feel like they're capable and can see, to get past like having low expectations and low self-esteem for them? We have to change how we are showing up and help them to build that confidence and build experiences so they can become confident. But on the front end, don't contribute to creating them to be who they are on the back end if they have low expectations and self-esteem.
all right. I think we got about 30 seconds, 60 seconds left. I'm gonna steal my partner's closing. Make him mad. I like to make him mad. He's always like Jim Watts. He's over there at the Black Archives of Mid-America. It was a plum pleasing pleasure having you on the show. I'm like, Jim, cut out all the niceties. As we always close, when you invest in your community, you're really just investing in yourself. Good night.
Program is brought to you by the Kansas City Business Association.